on the other, and it was just, you know, it didn't perform like it could have years earlier.
I was a huge supporter of Sting, just like I was The Rock. And I think that it was ridiculous how, you waited for years for Sting to come in the way he did. He may have a chance of winning. That was what was always in the back of your mind. And then they turn it around, and he gets a sledgehammer broken in the face. He gets the pedigree. He gets super kicked by Shawn Michaels in the face. What are they doing with these stars? I know that Vince McMahon has always had a grudge against WCW, but I mean, come on. To bring Sting in and push him to the point where he breaks his neck and you can't give him anything, I think it's time for Triple H to go. That's why over the next at least 2 years, my goal is to get Triple H out of the wrestling business. I have all this pressure on my shoulders to get rid of this and change that, and I'm slowly but surely getting around to all of it, but Triple H has to go. If he's going to keep doing this to people like Sting and Goldberg back in the day and The Rock, and it's just...
How you doing, Gregory Harris? Just got a new listener named Gregory Harris.
How does Gregory Harris think about... What does Gregory Harris think about Triple H? Does he support my campaign to get rid of Triple H?
I don't know. I don't know if he's into wrestling. He's new.
Don't even get me started on The Miz replacing Hulk Hogan for Tough Enough. That's ridiculous.
I mean, he chose a woman who should have been eliminated just because she was hot.
Yeah.
Just because he claimed she was hot. I mean, that's that's Bush League. I mean, I'm not trying to be negative about this, but it's Bush League. I mean, that's the type of thing that drove me, and it wasn't just them. The internet wrestling community with what they were with ZZ was even worse. You saw too many wrestlers that should have been treated, that should have been in the finals. And, you should have had either Patrick or Mata in the finals. You needed that person that could really match up well against Josh.
This is the worst thing. This is the worst Tough Enough since 2000. And what was the year they had the two women win, Jackie Gate and Linda Miles? Whatever year that was, this is the worst Tough Enough since then.
Yeah. I mean, oh yeah, God, yeah. I mean, this is bad. Then a lot of this had to do with the fact that ultimately it was the WWE Universe deciding this one. Now, I will say this. I think when as soon as ZZ saw the video that was done talking about the top 3 men and the top 3 women, when they went to ZZ and you saw the reaction that was done there with Booker T leaving there, and you saw them say, "Get him off our show. Get him off our show." That's when he finally decided to step it up. I mean, this guy ZZ, I mean, and people still defended him even at the end there. It's like, oh, he had a good match, and the judges said it was even better than the other. I said, he just simply matched up with Cesaro better. That's number one. I said number two. I said, look at his entrance. His entrance was too long and drawn out. He couldn't get it done. He couldn't get it done on the mic. He had no charisma. I said that's where Josh won. Josh started off slow, but man, when he picked it up there at the end, he got the fans going. I mean, and I know ZZ got a contract to be on NXT. They're going to develop him. But what about Patrick? What about Mata? Mata to me should have been the one in the finals against Josh. I mean, he really should.
I don't understand why they have Tough Enough in the Diva Search. This is what NXT is for. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well,
you have NXT to introduce these wrestlers, and then you got Tough Enough and stuff, saying the average Joe could be a wrestler. Like, the average Joe can't be a wrestler.
Well, I mean, believe me, I argued with people that on Twitter that wanted to defend ZZ. Even ZZ said, "Oh, why don't you want me to win?" Blah blah blah. I said, ZZ. I said, I looked at him. I'm like, look, you stink. I said, you
suck.
stink. I said, you're only in there because the internet wrestling community isn't taking this seriously. The internet wrestling community, half the time, when they try to get serious, doesn't know what they're talking about. I said, I've dealt with the internet wrestling community. Vince Russo tried to say that they're just simply the old school wrestling fans. They're not even that much. They're not even that much because I come from the old school. I've been a wrestling fan since 1979. I smartened up way before there was an internet. And the hardcore wrestling fans that go back to it when it was wrestling know it a hell of a lot better than them. I get killed by the internet wrestling community a lot, you know what I mean, because of the way I used to defend TNA. And, you know, and it's the internet wrestling community that forced the changes in TNA. I mean, people need to understand that.
Vince Russo was an idiot. As far as I'm concerned, the only one in the WCW that had any sense of direction was Eric Bischoff. If not for Eric Bischoff, that company would have failed long before it did. It was inevitable that it was going down. But if you want to put the blame on anybody for ruining WCW, it was Vince Russo and Ric Flair.
Disagree.
It had nothing to do with Eric Bischoff at all. He was a creative genius, and the ones that you blame for WCW's downfall is Ric Flair and Vince Russo because they were morons.
I wish I could agree with you on that one. Vince Russo's original run was getting it done, and was looking for everyone to turn a corner when they pulled the carpet out from under him. When he came back with Eric Bischoff, I knew the two of them couldn't work together, but it was also at the same time, as much as Eric Bischoff brought a profit into WCW, he's also the one that was also there when they started losing millions by the month, which is what really cost him his job. I mean, you know, and Eric Bischoff stayed complacent with the Hulk Hogan's and Kevin Nash's of the world, and that's where I had my problem, because the only two things really happened during Eric Bischoff's time that were brilliant moves. The NWO, which the NWO, as a make-believe wrestling organization, being competition to WCW, was done better than the real-life things like WCW versus WWE.
Oh, the NWO definitely was what WCW thrived off of, guaranteed.
You know, there's a lot. You know, I mean, I'm not saying. You know, I'm not saying. You know, I'm not putting down Bischoff, because yes, Bischoff was there for the big run. It's just it was not as original as some people would want to think. You know, I mean, he got, you know, the difference between Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage feuding in WCW as opposed to WWE was this time Hulk Hogan was the heel and Savage was the baby face. I mean, that's really what it is. Same thing with Rowdy Piper and Hogan. I mean, you know, you really want to talk about creative. When WWE was forced to get creative and get out of complacency themselves, that's when the Attitude Era happened. That's when the Attitude Era came about. You know, I mean, and they, you know, and the building blocks were built with guys who you never would dream of pushing. I mean, if people saw the New Age Outlaws, you know, as what they were, as Billy Gunn and Brian Armstrong, they would have never been pushed. They would have never been pushed. No. I mean, you know, it took guys opening to guys and really trying to use what you have that really got it over.
Same thing with the Dudley Boys.
Yeah, Dudley
Same thing
Boys
with the Dudley Boys. Dudley Boys and all those guys you see now, you would have never dreamed that they would have been pushed the way that they are being pushed now. Never.
I mean, you know, WCW took something old and wanted to make it new, and meanwhile, at the same time, it was ECW that came around that WWE said, we need to turn a corner with this. As much as they talk about Vince Russo and what he used to do and what he used to do with the magazines and how this should be written, you know, I mean, it's, you know, I look back at Paul Heyman and what was done in ECW that really helped turn a corner. I wasn't the biggest fan of ECW. You know, I'm like, you know, and in some ways I'm like Chuck Skull. I think it was extremely crappy wrestling.
Oh, it was.
Well, you know, I mean, I mean, especially with who Heyman would push the most. I mean, the Ravens, the Sandmans, with the exception really to say Shane Douglas. Shane Douglas back in '97. 97, '98. I mean, their top guys really were not the best wrestling wise. Shane Douglas was good. Taz was good too, but Taz, everything was just the same. Everything just looked the same, and and they just treated it that way. But
and now all Heyman
really
cares about. All Heyman cared about was his favorites. Heyman had his favorites. That was the thing about Paul Heyman. I found, you had Eric Bischoff with your favorites with the NWO. You obviously had Vince McMahon with his favorites with Steve Austin and The Rock. But Paul Heyman was someone who stood out for playing favorites, and the obvious favorites, like you just said, Raven, Sandman, Sabu. It's ridiculous. Me and you have interviewed over